Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I've entitled this message, Can We Conquer Fear and Anxiety in Our Lives? And can we do it on our own? It's funny, last week's hero was the female cow, the red heifer, and this week's is the female donkey. Balak is the name of this week's parasha, and he was king of the Moabites. I find that God has such a sense of humor when I study the Torah, when I read it. Balak's name means destroyer, while his father's name was Tzipor, which means a bird. But this destroyer, Balak, was like a little bird, and he was terrified of the Israelites. He knew that Israel had conquered Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, who had conquered his people, Moab. Now, Balak's people were wailing. They were saying, this horde will now lick clean all that is around us like an ox licks up the grass of the field. He was afraid. But everywhere they went, listen to this, everywhere they went, the Israelites said, let us pass through your country. We will not turn off into fields or vineyards. We will not drink water from the wells, from your wells. We will follow the king's highway until we have crossed your territory. But that didn't matter to Balak, because when fear and anxiety take hold of us, all reason flies out the window. Next, we see King Balak sends messengers to Bilam, who is a prophet of God, a Gentile prophet of God. So we can't say that God only chose Israeli prophets or Israelite prophets. Here was a Gentile prophet. And he asked him to curse these people with the idea that if they're cursed, he will be able to defeat them. And he described the Israelites as a people that came out of Egypt who hides the earth from view. A little exaggeration, some drama perhaps. This reminded me of Pharaoh. The Israelites had become so numerous that Pharaoh was afraid that they would join his enemy and defeat him. When did we ever hear that this was Israel's intent? Right up to today, Israel has never been the aggressor. We Jews have always just wanted to live in peace, wherever we are. In fact, our army is called the Israel Defense Force, IDF. It's not the offense, it's the defense. We always knew we'd have to defend ourselves. But Pharaoh's fear caused him to react, and so he has enslaved these people. Now, if their numbers were so great, why didn't the Israelites rise up against Pharaoh? Were they also frozen by fear? Shouldn't their numbers have helped them get over their fear? But even after they left Egypt with a fully armed force of 600,000 young men, fully armed, they still lived in fear. What does that teach us about the nature of fear? We were in the desert 40 years, but it did little to change our attitude. We see just before we're entering the promised land, 10 of the 12 Hebrew scouts who were sent in to reconnoiter the land that God had already told them would be theirs, they cried to Moshe and instilled fear in everyone. We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves. We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves. So that's how we must have looked to them. Fear, whether real or imagined, stood in the way of being able to see that their God was Adonai Tzivaot, the Lord of the armies. Everything that God had done for them in the past was forgotten. How often does that happen to us? But here, there are two exceptions, Joshua and Caleb. They were not afraid. They stood up. And these are two examples of that we can overcome fear. It's possible. So now let's look at Bilam, a prophet of God hired by King Balak to curse the Israelites. Bilam had heard directly from the Creator. And he knew that he had no power to curse whomever God had blessed. Still, he tried 3 times because Balak kept insisting and tempting him with more and more wealth. But every time Bilam opened his mouth, out came a blessing instead of a curse. He finally gave up and left. But his part in the cursing of Israel was far from over, as we read at the end of this portion. But that's a topic for next week. In Genesis 12:3, God declares, I will bless those. Notice, I will bless those, that's plural, who bless you, and curse the one, singular, who curses you, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Here the Torah is sending us a message that there are very few who can curse Israel, including our own people. Believe it or not, today there are Jews, there are Israelis who are cursing their own people. Our Haftorah portion from Micah 14 declares, in anger and fury will I wreak retribution upon the nations that have not obeyed. Obedience to our Creator is a key factor to having a blessed life. How do we know what to obey? There's no mystery there. God spelled it out for us at Mount Sinai. However, most people prefer to live by their own rules, refusing to believe what God inscribed in stone and subsequently gave to Moshe for us to bring to the world. Here's an analogy that came to my mind. Let's imagine that God here is the CEO. Imagine that there's an important project that we have been hired to work on. The CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, is someone we can trust because we've seen the things he's done in the past. We've seen his credentials. We know from experience that he has the capability, and we can depend on him to get the job done. We personally can feel at ease because he is responsible for the outcome, not us. All you and I, or whoever is a part of this project, all we have to do is our small part in it. And although it may be challenging at times, this knowledge that he's in control helps us to breathe easy. It's important to know our place in the scheme of things and not to take on more than has been assigned to us. Once our role has been clearly defined and the rules laid out, we can choose. We either accept our roles, and obey the rules or not. If we accept and obey, everything runs like a well-oiled machine. If we don't, chaos ensues. We see that in sports. Every player is taught where he needs to be and what he needs to do. But when one lone wolf, one lone wolf tries to do things on his own, the entire game is at risk. And it won't be long until that player is replaced by someone who can obey the rules. The level of fear and anxiety in every family, city, and nation is on the rise again. Many of us are dealing with it in our own lives, in our own families. And it's so easy to fall into fear. It's everywhere, all around us. We don't know what to believe in the news. War is raging in various parts of the globe, and we're especially touched by the war in Israel. Most governments are not for the people. Our daily battle for our health and well-being is out of control, as well as the cost of living. And the media is expert in building fear in us. Millions, if not billions of dollars are spent on psychiatrists, psychologists, self-help programs, meditations, drug, alcohol, whatever, because society is drowning in fear and anxiety. And this is what causes us to forget who we are, what we are capable of, and what our purpose is, and above all, We have forgotten that the Creator is our protector and that He supplies all our needs. Now, this is important. If we cannot control or even defeat fear, God would not repeatedly tell us, do not fear. Remember, if we can't control fear, God wouldn't say, do not fear. He never asks anything from us that we are unable to do. He never asks us to bring anything to Him that He hasn't already given. We cannot say, someone was born that way. I love the song, "Fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by thy name. Thou art mine." Those are the most powerful words that we will ever hear. But believing and trusting them is quite another matter. It takes time and a lot of practice and exercise. Many years ago, when I was practicing hypnosis, I started to do a lot of work on myself through auto-suggestion. I realized that during our early lives, others tell us who we are and what we can achieve, what we can be. If we believe them, we live within their paradigm, for better or worse. But God has another paradigm in mind for us, and it doesn't include fear. Of course, there's our natural response to stimulus or to stimuli, both real and imagined. And we have an amazing imagination. But remember, most things that we fear or worry about never happened. Never happened. All these stories in the scriptures are to teach us the principles by which we can learn to conquer fear and anxiety, to hold on to our sanity and our shalom in the midst of all that is happening around us. Finding and keeping my shalom is an everyday task. I begin in the morning by dedicating myself to God, and I say, "Oh Lord, order my way. Show me what you have in mind for me today." Then I look at my agenda and do the practical things that I need to do to keep my life running in balance and order. I start a day with a psalm, and I always remind myself He's in control. And when I'm hit with a negative emotion like fear that rises up to destroy my shalom, my inner peace, I just stop. I stop whatever I'm doing and I stare it in the face. I ask myself, is it real or am I imagining it? Is it from my past? Can I fix it? Can I deal with it? Does it involve another human being with whom I need to communicate? I'm like a dog with a bone, and I don't let go until I find a solution. If I can't fix it, I have to let it go and give it to God. And then I watch how He always steps in. I repeat to myself Psalm 46:10 out loud. Be still and know that I am God. I give it all to Him and say, Hineni, Lord, here I am, use me. I don't know about you, but the thing that I've noticed throughout my walk with God is how He is fulfilling in my life Proverbs 3:5-8. He says, trust in God with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight or smooth. I've experienced so often that God allows me to walk a hard and bumpy road to help me trust in Him. And then He makes the things that I do smooth and easy. It doesn't just happen overnight. It takes work. Faith without works is dead. And that's when I learn that I have nothing to fear. When Balaam was on his way to curse Israel, he was blind to the fact that an angel of God was blocking his path. But his faithful donkey saw it, and froze, trying to protect him from the angel's sword. But perhaps Bilam was so blinded by greed or by the fear of what Balak would do to him if he didn't obey. But then we read Numbers 22. Then God opened the eyes of Bilam, and he saw God's angel standing in the way. God made it clear to Bilam that what he could and couldn't do. In the same way, God laid out rules for humanity. Although they're not complicated, they are far from easy because of our nature with which we struggle every single day. We can be like Bilam, a blind and lone wolf prophet who needed to have his spiritual eyes open. In the annals of our people, there have been good kings, unlike Balak, and good prophets, unlike Bilam, both of whom were Gentiles, who have heard God's voice and obeyed. The Torah was a gift from our Creator, meant to be shared with all the nations. Israel, however, is the host nation and is responsible for the preservation and dissemination of his most important project. We were told by our Creator, do not add and do not take away anything from his words. That's where all religions fail. Belief in, trust in, and obedience to the Creator is not a religion. It's a two-way relationship. So who are the main characters of our story? And what can we learn from them? Balak represents those who refuse to consider that there's a supreme being upon whom he could rely. Perhaps he believed, like Pharaoh, that he was a god. But then when push came to shove, he couldn't trust in himself and allowed fear to influence his choices. Bilam used his relationship with God to get what he wanted. He was simply a greedy prophet for hire. The donkey was the only one of the three given the gift of vision into the spiritual realm. He was loyal to his owner up to the end, and he spoke the truth when he saw it. If God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through you and me. My vote is for the donkey. The moral of the story: if others make us feel like a donkey because we trust in God, be glad. We're on the right path. We cannot solve the vast problems of this world. God can. What we can do is what Micah says in this Haftorah portion in chapter 6, verse 8. You have been told, O mortal, what is good, what God requires of you, only to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Shabbat Shalom.